Rightio, Jim. Welcome. Thanks for chatting with me this morning. I was excited to see you post on your social media channels a little while ago. I do every podcast that anyone ever asks me to do, and I thought that's great because I'd love to pick Jim's brain about some stuff. So I appreciate you making the time for me today. I wanted to ask you a few questions about your very famous Jim's franchise business, and then I wanted to spin the conversation a little bit towards agriculture, which is the industry, one of the industries that I'm in, and I wanted to pick your brain and see if you could maybe help me disrupt the space a little bit more than I already am. I'm causing some waves, but I'd like to make some more. So firstly, I'd like to know, how many entrepreneurs do you think you've created in the Australian marketplace?
Well, we've currently got more than 5,000 franchisees. Most of them have never been in business in the past. How many have actually started with us and gone on to other and greater things, I have no idea, but probably a few thousand more. Often people start with something like a service franchise as the first business, and then they go on to other things later.
It's a huge number, isn't it?
Yeah, we think we've probably created more millionaires than any company in this country.
I love it. Well, that's a great thing to hang your hat on. What do people need to get started with you in one of your franchises?
Not a very heavy investment, depending on the division. Could be anything from $20,000 to $50,000. And just a willingness to learn and to stick by our system, which is fairly tough in terms of things like customer service and so forth. So we have a fairly elaborate process by which we screen and we monitor complaints and give feedback and, recognise achievements and do retraining and other things to coaching if we don't get the results we want.
Do you find it hard to train people up to your style of customer service, or do you find people respond well to it?
Most people do pretty well. With the right kind of training and support systems, most of our franchisees give very, very good service. There's always a few that you have to push every now and then, get warning letters and so forth. That just goes with it. But the great majority are successful. We have a reasonably high success rate. People going into independent business, chance of being like a service business like ours would be chance of being a business within 12 months is only about 5 or 10%. With us, it's like 88%. So the great majority of people who take on actually do go on to run successful businesses, and the great majority make good income.
Yeah, that's huge. What do you think your highest earners earn?
Millions.
Yeah.
There'd be franchisees profiting and clearing more than $1 million a year.
I love it. Yeah. That's fantastic. I tell you what, I had, and to your point, having a good process to teach people your way of customer service. One of my businesses in town in Albury-Wodonga here is a bicycle shop, and maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I was over in Taipei in Taiwan at a trade show, one of the biggest bicycle trade shows in the world, and I got this phone call from one of my managers, all in a huff and a puff, because a customer returned a pair of gloves because the stitching had pulled and wanted an exchange or a warranty on them, and they didn't have a receipt, and the manager was all stressed out of their mind. And I thought, I'm in another country, in another time zone, at a trade, and I don't even have the systems to equip my staff to make a customer whole with a $30 process. I thought, what sort of nonsense is this? So I came home and I printed a 2-metre wide banner, still behind my counter today, and it says, "We will gladly repair, replace or refund any purchase at any time for any reason." And since then, I've got happier staff, happier customers, and it just so happens that basically every item or transaction that I've been left holding the bucket, my suppliers have made me whole on that anyway, because they want to keep a good relationship for me. Just keeping people happy, it's a really easy policy, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, you're right too. My mother used to tell a story about how she returned these unsatisfactory good to Myers, which was big in those days, and later discovered that it wasn't actually Myers she bought them from. But she was the biggest fan of Myers you could possibly imagine. Never went anybody else and told everybody about what a great company they were. So I think it was a good investment on their part.
Well, they can write that off as a marketing expense, can't they?
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of friends in town who are tradies, and that's why they all love Bunnings. They know they could probably go to the local hardware store, family owned, and get better service and advice, or go to a Total Tools and maybe get some better quality equipment. But the fact that they can have an easy, no fuss on the spot replacement for a drill that burns out or a shovel that snaps, they just go to that one-stop shop and pay that little bit extra, because I think people have this perceptions Bunnings the cheapest. It's not, but it's the easiest. And they just make it really simple for people. So it's a great philosophy. It obviously works at scale.
Yeah, Bunnings is good. We have a warranty fund in our business, which is paid for when franchisees sign usually, and we've given out, I don't know how many millions of dollars over the years just to fix client problems. Normally the franchisee has to, but if the franchisee has disappeared and something's gone wrong, then we fix it. Even if, say, a fence that's 5 years old that's proven to be defective, we'll go and replace it with no cost.
Do you have is there a process when a franchise finishes a job that they take photos and upload it to some screening process? Is there anything like that you do for quality control?
No, not really, because it's very hard to tell from a photo. You can look great from a photo, but it's doing terrible. The basic requirement is the franchisees the client's happy. If there's any question about it, then we can send somebody else can go along and have a look at it. But the great majority of complaints aren't about quality of work. They're about things like not returning phone calls, not turning up, not providing quotes, those kind of things.
Well, phone calls are an enormous one in the amount of, it's a full-time job in my businesses just to handle and return inquiries. It's enormous, and it's hard to quantify the value of it, but it is a big undertaking. And I don't think the screening, the taking photos of a job thing, always works. My uncle is he has a lawn mowing business here in town, and he does a lot of contract work for commission housing and that sort of thing. And he has to take photos on the app on the iPad once he's done a job, and he still gets reprimanded for all the trash left everywhere, even though it wasn't there, proof by photograph when he left. He can prove it wasn't there, but someone tipped the bin over and he still has to go back and clean it up again.
Well, we don't tend to argue with clients very much. If it's a genuine problem, even if it's not necessarily entirely our fault, you're still going to fix them up. I mean, the basic rule is you've got to keep the customer happy. I mean, that's really all there is to it, because a happy... Look, I'll give you an example. Let's just say that you have a discussion with a client about getting a job done, and you say, I'm going to do so-and-so and so-and-so, and then you come to the end of it, and the client says, I'm not happy because you haven't done so-and-so. That wasn't in your verbal explanation. Now, in our view, you're still in the wrong because you didn't give a written quote. Yep. So even if you're right, if the customer's not happy and they remember it differently, then you're wrong. So you have to follow processes. So when a client says, when you ring a client back, if you can't get through, you've got to text them as well. Because otherwise, if the client says you didn't ring, or even if you did ring, if you didn't text them to confirm it and to give them extra reminder, you haven't followed the process. So you've really got to go above and beyond.
Absolutely, yeah, it makes so much sense. And how do your franchisees, when they've completed a job, how do they get payment from that customer? Do they carry around a machine for payment on the spot, or is it an invoice system?
Mostly payment on the spot. Yeah, they just carry a little white thing that they sent them, and they put it through the machine. Yeah, not on the spot.
I often wonder why more tradespeople don't do this. If I have a refrigeration technician or someone come through my butchery or anything like that, sometimes I don't get an invoice off these companies for 4 or 5 weeks. And then it's got 2 or 3 weeks of terms on it. So their cash flow's 7, 8 weeks slower than they could be if they just had a little dongle in their pocket that charged them a 1% handling fee.
Well, I don't think these people would be self-employed contractors, or they wouldn't want to wait that long. Our guys certainly don't want. If you don't pay them quickly, they wouldn't know why.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit towards agriculture, a lot of your franchisees are labour, and they're outside and mowing grass and all these sorts of things. So obviously there's some chemical use, and you'd be using different herbicides to maintain gardens, I'd imagine. Do you have any thoughts around glyphosate? Obviously it's under heavy lawsuits around the world. A lot of people want food that hasn't had these sorts of herbicides sprayed on it, but then obviously they're on every shelf in every Bunnings around the country, and most homes would have them in the garage. Do you or Jim's have a stance or an opinion on these herbicides and poisons?
Well, I can tell you as a contractor, when I was a mowing contractor for 15 years, I've never used them. I don't like poisons. I just don't enjoy them. If I want to dig a garden bed, I dig it over with a spade, and you get turned over earth. I know a lot of our guys do use glyphosate for sure. I don't use it on my farm either. Actually, I like the organic stuff. I've got a 250 acres which we're planting for food-bearing trees, and we don't use any artificial pesticides, poisons, anything. I think it wrecks the wildlife. But it's what the client wants. If somebody wants poisons, then that's what you use.
Tell me more about your farm. I didn't realise you had a property. So you've got 250 acres, and are you converting the whole property to orchard?
Yeah, basically. A lot of it's bush, actually, more than half of it's bush, but I'm actually planting nut trees or trying to plant nuts in the forested areas itself. The rest of it's just being planted out. Huge variety of, mostly nut trees, a lot of fruit trees and stuff too. I love the organic stuff. I reckon that's powerful, and it's very, very productive. I mean, you can grow like 2 tons of beef meat per acre, or you can grow 200 tons of nuts. Is a way of feeding the world is fantastic. And I'm quasi-vegetarian, don't eat much meat myself, so yeah, it's a good venture. I love it. Love my farm.
One of the things that we do on our property here is that we layer our enterprises. We call them stacked enterprises. Obviously, the cost of land is a really big expense in agriculture, and on a balance sheet, a lot of the time it doesn't make any sense at all. So we actually lease nearly all the land that we farm. But you talking about, nut trees, we have some plantations where we've just, restored some natives out there just to get a bit of biodiversity back on the farm. And then once those trees are established, 4 or 5 years old, then we start running pigs under them. And nut trees and pigs obviously go hand in hand, but you talk about nuts versus beef. I look at nuts plus pork and leveraging the environment's natural sequence even further and getting those, double, triple dips out of the same meter.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. Actually, that's one of our plans for when it's completed. I dislike the way that farmers deal with animals. I think animals cooped up in pens is disgusting. I've got chickens actually, but they're completely free range. You can't even see them in their pen. The vegetation is so dense. And that's a very small scale thing. But as far as pigs are concerned, I think that's the best way to raise animals and let them run free, let them eat, and it's good for the animals, and I think it's better food too.
It absolutely, I believe it absolutely is, and that's what our whole business is built on. And I think pigs are the low-hanging fruit, because out of all the pigs in factory farming, I really believe pigs are treated the worst. Their environment, you could argue, is quite similar to a chicken or a different sort of feedlotted animal. But I think the level of intelligence and the level of expression that a pig would naturally have in its environment, what we're doing to them in our factory farms is really a sin. So all of our pigs we actually call our pigs pasture raised. We try to differentiate ourselves from free range a little bit, because free range systems are static. The pigs don't follow this rotation. And that's not a natural system, and they end up compacting the paddocks and really just turning them into hard pack rammed earth. So our pig mobs, we run mobs of 50 pigs in a group, and we move them to fresh pasture every week, and we actually train them to a single hot wire, like you can with your cattle. And they're incredibly efficient on pasture. We can do chores for 50 pigs a day in less than 15 minutes. They're very easygoing animals, and the final produce we put through our butchery, a lot of people mistake our pork for beef because the flesh is so red. It's unlike anything they've seen in the supermarket, which is Australia ran a marketing campaign in the 90s called Pork the Other White's Meat. You might remember it, and really they shifted genetics and put them into sheds, and the pigs stopped exercising and lost a lot of muscle tone, and they had to try to re-educate the consumer base. This is what it's meant to look like, trust us. And so when people see mine, they're really quite blown away, but I'm trying to tell them this is what it's been like for thousands of years. This is normal.
So what's a hot wire system? I've never heard of that.
It's electric fence. So a hot wire is just one single strand on our farm of polybraid. So it's actually a plastic fibre, and it's got metal filaments wrapped through it. And so we use temporary fence posts that we step in. They've got little foot cradles on them, and you punch them into the ground, and they've got little plastic clips that you run your hot wire through, and we have them about 30 centimetres off the ground, because the rule is with pigs you want to have the electric fence about the same height as their nose is off the ground. They've got poor eyesight, so you really want to put it in their visibility. And then you run an electric spark through it, and as long as the pigs are happy inside the hot wire, because it's not a physical boundary that's going to restrain them. If a pig wants to go under it, through it, or over it, they will. But if they're happy inside and they've got their food and their shelter and their wallows and each other, they'll stay in there quite happily. And our pigs know, they can tell when we come up with the truck and we start unloading materials that the move's ready, and they all get frisky, you know, like a dog when you get the lead off the wall and they're all ready to go into their new paddock on a Monday and explore the new pasture. So it's a great little system.
Well, that's good. That's good. Yeah, pigs are among the smartest of animals. They're at least equivalent to dogs. I think it's shameful that we treat them sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. Talking about the treatment of animals, have you been tracking the situation in Western Australia with the live export and everything happening there? You know, the reason I asked, Jim, is I remember listening to you during the COVID lockdowns, and you were pointing out the hypocrisy in the Victorian government, where there was, you know, rules for thee and not for me, and you were advocating the right to work for your employees, or your franchisees, which I think was completely commendable. And I acknowledge you for having a real backbone through that period of time. And I'm looking over in Western Australia now, the Labor government's trying to squash live export. I was tracking one farmer on Twitter last week who was digging a ditch to shoot and bury 3,000 ewes because there was no market to sell them into, because export's gone. The abattoirs are all completely overwhelmed and they can't process anymore. They're in the worst drought they've ever had on record in that part of Australia. And so not only is there no feed, but there's no water. The bores have dried up and the animals are just starting to suffer. And you know, I hear all this feedback from my customers. We'd love to eat more lamb, but we can't afford it. It's so expensive compared to beef. And then you're looking 3,000 kilometres across the country, and they're digging big holes and burying thousands of these animals because of a rug pull by the Labor government, essentially. I was wondering if you were tracking that story and had any comments on it.
No, I don't. Why does the government stop it? It was a matter of animal cruelty? I mean, did they think it was bad for them?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk over years, and they've paused live cattle exports for Northern Territory in the past, and it's always welfare concerns is what's cited. And the real question is, when you rug pull a policy like this on the dime, what's the welfare outcome? Whether you agree that live exports are good or a poor welfare activity, is it higher welfare to now have no market for these animals and bury them all and waste them all? It's a real shame as far as I can tell. And the live export thing's really nuanced, because I can understand putting a few thousand sheep on a boat being unpopular and easy to paint as a bad exercise. But when you look at it holistically, all the markets that we export into around the world actually get upskilled. So if we have a trade agreement with Indonesia, we actually go to Indonesia and we improve their facilities and processes in their abattoirs and in their food supply chain system. So the global effect of this industry is really quite profound, I believe. And so seeing it just be rug pulled on these farmers, my heart breaks for these guys. It's very tough.
You can feel for the farmers, but I do have a big thing about cruelty to animals, I must say. I get shocked at the way I would never buy, for example, battery eggs from battery hens at all. I think that's just an incredibly brutal thing to do to an animal, to keep them cooped up in a tiny cage all their life. I really think that kind of thing should be illegal. So I don't know, I'm probably the best person to talk about live animal exports, because And animals are sentient beings. They suffer just like we do. It's not, yeah.
No, I think we completely agree on we completely agree on all those things, Jim. Like you mentioned your chickens being outside. I've got 1,000 hens on this farm here. We have an egg part of our business where we supply local organic supermarkets and restaurants, and they're pastured hens. They've got their Maremma guard dogs hanging out with them, and when the sun comes up, their automatic doors on their mobile coops open, and they all run free. And it's a beautiful thing. And I started farming. A little bit of background on our business here, Wolki Farm. I started farming because I wasn't happy with the transparency and integrity of the food I was able to source. I started doing research on labels such as certified organic or free range, and you start researching what those things actually mean and what the regulations actually stipulate. And it's very basic. You know, it's a lot of, we call it greenwashing. It's a lot of fancy mumbo jumbo for, a lot of the time you don't get much out of it.
No, I've heard free range chicken supposedly, or there's this tiny gate that they can go through but hardly ever do. Stuff like that. It's not well enough regulated. We're actually planning to start a health-based company fairly soon, and one of the things we want to do is to source our food from people that we know, that farmers that we know are doing the right thing in terms of eggs, in terms of vegetables, in terms of just good growing conditions.
Can you share more about that? Will that be under the Jim's banner?
Yes, yeah. Basically, the plan is Jim's Health. This is just something we're working on right now. In fact, we're just getting going, but the idea it's mainly aimed at human health. People ought to eat better, less processed food, more natural food, and more fruit and vegetables. Minimum of salt and sugar and fat, just healthy. So we're starting up a small restaurant at our conference centre, and we're going to be developing packaged food because healthy food can actually be quite delicious. It really can. My wife's a very, very good cook, and you can cook up things like beans and pumpkin with the right kind of sauces, and they taste absolutely fantastic. So that's what we're trying to do, to help people to live healthier. And as part of this, we'll have a health coaching going on. So people who want to live healthy, and this is not just diet, but also exercise, can be helped and encouraged to do that. So it's a whole new venture we're just launching right now.
Yeah, fantastic. That's exciting. To your point that healthy food can be delicious, I think it is the most delicious, but we have to detox our palates from super processed, all the sugar and all the complex carbohydrates we're used to. When we talk to our friends and family, we say when you go to the supermarket, avoid all the aisles. Stick to the wall, stick to the fresh fruit and the fresh meat and the dairy and the cheese, and stay out of those. Even the muesli bars, people might buy a muesli bar thinking they're doing themselves a favour, and you read the ingredients list. The second part might be canola oil and laden with sugar. So,
yeah, we've got a big problem with obesity in this country, as elsewhere, of course, too. And that's a large part of just wrong food. Super processed food. There's a book called Super Processed People that I've just read some time ago, which just talks about the dangers of it and how you reformulate food. If you can't pronounce the ingredients or you never heard of them, you probably shouldn't buy it. The only reason I would see for going into the inner circles of the supermarket will be things like nuts, because they eat a lot of nuts, and also some like Thai spices and things. If you can add that to a vegetable dish, it's really quite nice. But generally speaking, you're quite right. Vegetables, fruits, that's where you want to spend your time. Fruit, meat, cheese, natural stuff.
Well, sounds like you won't even need to.
Our grandparents.
That's another one of our truisms. If grandma didn't eat it, you shouldn't eat it either. Sounds like you won't even need to go into the supermarket aisle soon. You'll just order it off Jim's Groceries, and it'll be delivered to your door with your meal plan and your exercise regime.
Well, that's fine. Yeah. Well, I would be very happy to do that. I love the food that we make is something that I would eat myself. Actually, every recipe we're going to do will be personally taste tested, not only by myself but by other people too. If I wouldn't want to eat it, then I wouldn't want anybody else to eat it.
Yeah, fantastic. Great way to do things. So that's actually a fantastic place to sort of kick off a little bit, because one of the questions I had for you, Jim, was how would you disrupt the meat market, the meat industry in Australia? And I had no idea that you were a passionate animal welfare advocate, and we're looking at getting into the food space yourself. So you've talked about health a little bit in welfare, but to give you a bit of context, we started our farm business because we weren't happy with the integrity of what we could source. And we very quickly realised that processing was a bottleneck. So we started a butchery, and we've got full-time butchers, and they cut up our meat for us. And everything we do is packaged and frozen, and we dispatch freight around the country. We can ship to 10,000 postcodes, and it goes out every single week. And we have customers crawling out of the woodworks all over the country. This week I sent stuff to Perth and Brisbane and Hobart, and of course all the local cities on the east coast here. People desperate for food that hasn't been laden with chemicals and animals that haven't been raised in cages. And I'm always looking at, where can we meet the market, and how can we sort of carve out this niche for us? Something that I've had amazing success with just in the last few weeks is making sausages with no ingredients. We just take beef and we put it through the mincer and we put it in a hog casing, no seasoning, no binder, no anything, and people are going berserk on it because they're so. I just feel like we make things so complicated, and we make all these flavoured and preservative and filler sausages when all they really want is a good snag with nothing in it. So I'm interested if you have got any thoughts on the meat market. Like, as a consumer yourself, you said you look for things with words you can pronounce on the label. Are there any other litmus tests that you do in your shopping regime?
Well, the government star rating's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. If you see something that's got 5 or 4.5 stars on it, that's a pretty good guide. If my kids insist on, my son insists on breakfast cereal, I say, okay, at least 4 stars. It's got to have fibre and stuff. But ideally, I like if I'm going to eat a cereal, I like oatmeal. I think that's one of the nicest things there is. You put oatmeal in a rice steamer. It cooks it very, very effectively, and you sweeten them with a few sultanas. So I reckon natural food tastes good. I actually grow as much of my own. I eat as much as possible to eat my own food. I've got quite a big vegetable patch at the farm, so I've got a lot of potatoes and pumpkins and silver beet and zucchini, that sort of stuff too. And I tell you what, it just tastes better. I can't exactly say why, but it really tastes better than stuff you buy from the supermarket. I think also another thing I believe in too is one of the great sources of waste is misshapen food. The supermarkets don't want stuff that potato looks a bit strange. Well, the stuff I get from my farm can look very odd when it comes out of the ground, but it tastes really good. So I'm big into that kind of stuff. There's a lot of waste goes on in these things.
Absolutely, and the fact that a carrot can be too twisty or a pear can be too rectangular or whatever it might be, I just find the premise of that completely offensive. It seems like a tactic just to put the boot on the neck of the farmer. I've never spoken to a consumer that demands more uniform carrots, and if you asked someone off the street, would you return a carrot if it was a bit crooked, I don't think there's a sane person in the country that would think like that. I really don't understand it seems sinister to me, if not. And to expand on that, something that we're big on, Jim, is not just prizing the prime animal. There's more animals in the lamb industry than prime lambs. We've also got muttons and we've got hoggets and we've got all these other animals. So we actually spend more of our time figuring out how to process, market and distribute those animals that fall outside of that category. What do you do with your old bulls or your cull cows or anything? The way the Australian market handles them is it's either hamburger or export. But then you go over to Italy or France, and the most highly prized steaks are from 8-year-old cows, 10-year-old cows. So, this straight carrot, perfect fruit, prime animal lens is just very wasteful and lazy, I think. I don't think there's any such thing as bad meat or bad food. I like the phrase that there's just inappropriate cooking. So we're on a bit of a mission to train people. This is hogget, and it's a great resource in our landscape here, and this is what we have to. This is how you handle it, and customers are responding really nicely to it.
Look, it's great that you can go direct. One of the problems with the supermarkets, they screw farmers into the ground. I remember working on a wool and wheat farm in Western Australia when I left school, which is a long time ago, and they'd go they'd be selling wool on the market, and they'd go into a shop to buy the wool, and it was like 5% of there was like 20 times what they'd actually got paid for it. And they said it wouldn't make any difference if we just gave it to them. They got so little of the actual return. It just seems bad. I don't know. I really always liked farmers, actually, even when I wasn't a farmer. They just seem to be the salt of the land, the good people. And yeah, it's sad. It's sad that there's so few family farms around too. There's too big these multinational huge things that it's all driven by process and efficiency and stuff like that. I think farming is a wonderful life. I love my farm. Fortunately, I don't have to make a living out of it. It's more of a passion project, and so I'm in a good situation. But I love going up there. Actually, I spend a couple of days a week, and I just go out into paddocks and get filthy and dig things up, and you know, it's just fun.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got 3 young children, and there's nothing better than being on the land for a family as well. You know, I often talk about how farmers are price takers, not price makers, and we've set up our business to be a price maker. And I can't wrap my head around the premise of working for a whole season and then auctioning off my goods. And you know, you have a boom year and a bust year, and I just think for everything, for the health of your business, for your mental health and everything, the industry incentivizes nothing but efficiency. You have to squeeze every gram of wheat you can and every kilo of lamb you can, and that's got externalized impacts that aren't always good in a holistic sense. So for us, the importance of being price makers and being able to price our labour and price our efforts means we don't have to take these shortcuts off our farm. We can go out and hand chip the weeds instead of using glyphosate, because we have customers that appreciate that and they'll pay us for that effort, instead of just being punished in a commodity market that doesn't respect the chemical-free produce at all.
We're doing terrible things to the farming environment. I mean, basically, we're mining the soil. You're putting all these artificial chemical fertilizers and pesticides on it that destroys the absolute life, all the bacteria, the worms, everything else. And the food just gets, and the soil gets blown away. What you need to do is restore the fertility, put the carbon back. And that makes healthier plants and healthier animals that are more resistant to disease. I mean, this thing where you're dosing animals with antibiotics is shocking in the extreme. You put them in conditions where they're going to get sick, and then you pump them with antibiotics to try and get over that. Whereas if they were in a healthy environment, they wouldn't need it. And the other thing too is, of course, to do feeding antibiotics en masse to animals, it breeds antibiotic resistance. So people are going to die of disease, which they're starting to already because they're resistant to these things.
Absolutely. It's a real problem. On our farm, Jim, we've used antibiotics twice in 5 years, and one was with a poor case of recurring mastitis in a cow who was suffering, and another cow cut herself on a star picket quite deeply and looked like it was going to get infected. But you're completely right that we're caging animals up into an environment where the air's poisonous. Like, of course they need these subtherapeutic antibiotics just to scratch along, and a really sinister side effect of these subtherapeutic antibiotics that we lace their feed with is that they're also growth accelerants. So, you know, where's the incentive to stop using them if the animals stay alive in these highly efficient systems and they also grow a bit quicker? Well, thumbs up. Let's keep going with it.
You're quite right about the use. They should be used for medical reasons. You should use antibiotics for animals the same way as you use them for people.
Yes.
Not just drench them all the time.
Yes, we advertise our meat as antibiotic free, and we were very passionate about that. And then the first time, I think we were 3 or 4 years into our farming journey, and I had this cow that had mastitis, and I usually have some herbal remedies. I give them a vitamin C shot and a few different supplements, and I milk them out, and I use a cold compress, and I can normally get on top of it because we breed ex-Jersey milking cows who are predisposed to it. And this one cow, I couldn't get on top of it, and the infection got harder, and I'd go near her and she'd recoil her leg because she didn't want me to touch her quarter because it hurt so much. And I looked at her and I thought, if this was my child and they were this ill, you know, they would be off to the doctors to get a script. And it changed my perception of antibiotics. They're in and of themselves an amazing tool. How lucky are we to have them? But thrown out as a preventative medication, is just completely irresponsible, and it speaks volumes about the lack of sophistication in regards to preventative health in our farming system. So, but what we do now is if we treat an animal with antibiotics, we then sell that animal. Once its withholding period's over, we sell it into the commodity market so we can maintain that commitment to our customers.
Yeah, no, you're quite right. I have heard of farmers who won't use antibiotics even for a very sick animal. That seems to me cruel. I mean, a lot of it's got to do with animal welfare. If you treat animals well, then it's good for them, but it's also good for consumers too. I just think treating animals brutally is just not good for anybody at any level of the organisation, anywhere in the world. Customers, animals, anything.
Absolutely.
Animals should be treated decently.
And I think that, you know, a lot of the bad press around agriculture is quite often exposés on the poor behaviour in abattoirs. You know, there was one in Tasmania recently where I think they were, what did they do? They cut the head off a lamb and they threw it around the room, or they did something like that, and it was very unsavoury, and it doesn't make for a good headline at all. And I look at that, and I don't agree with that sort of behaviour. I don't think it's acceptable in any sort of workplace, let alone when sentient beings, like you said, are involved. But on one level, I sort of think, what do you expect? Like, we've employed this tiny portion of the population to do all of our killing for us. You know, if we wind back the clock throughout history, it wasn't many generations ago where each family would slaughter the food they consumed, and that sort of, I don't know how you'd phrase it, maybe that trauma-based activity or that dirty work, everyone did a little bit of it, and I think that protected people from becoming desensitized to it, and maybe it kept them a bit more humble, and they honoured the process a little bit more. But now that we've got this, 20 guys in an abattoir that slaughter all the meat for 1 million people, I'm not saying it's acceptable, but I'm sort of saying, like, I feel for these guys. They're having to do all this dirty work for anybody. I can't imagine it's the nicest job to have. I'm glad I don't do it.
No, yeah, you're right too. But we do separate ourselves. Meat is something that's in a cellophane pack, and it's all hygienic. I remember taking my kids to a trout farm, and then we caught the trout, and you killed them and you ate them, and the kids were quite upset. They said, "Daddy killed the fish," but that's what you eat every day. You've got to understand that when you eat meat, something's losing their life, and that's part of it. Now, I don't have any objection to doing that, but I think it's important that we understand and we also treat the animals decently. Yeah, death is part of their life, but let's do the best we can for them.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's a huge disconnect between consumers and reality and production. I had a cousin of mine who goes to a nice private school in Sydney. When he came to visit the farm years ago, he might have been 12 or 13 years old. We're looking at the cattle in the paddock, and he said, "Oh, so that's a Jersey, that's the one you get milk from." And I said, "That's right." He said, "Which one do you get meat from?" I said, "All of them." And we had this real disconnect. We couldn't understand what each other was saying. And I ended up figuring out he didn't understand that meat was muscle and you had to kill the animal to take it. He thought you harvested meat from an animal similar to the way you harvested milk. I thought, we've got 12, 13-year-old boys going to fancy private schools. I don't understand meat is flesh from a dead animal. So we open up our farm and we do. I would have over 1,000 school children a year come across our properties and have a look at our food systems and pat a chicken and see what goes on, because I'm really passionate about that. Like you said, people, I think that we've got a better chance of people respecting and paying that little bit extra for the more humane and environmentally conscious systems if they actually understand what they're buying in the first place.
So what's your farm? Is it meat only, or do you grow vegetables and other things as well?
So we have beehives. I've got 25 beehives. So we do a bit of honey as well. And we did have a market garden for 4 years, and we've not long shut that down. We were doing that in a shared farming system where we were setting up the equipment and the land, and people were coming in and chipping in the labour, and then we had a share profit at the end. But I tell you what, Jim, it's a lot easier to grow cattle than it is to grow carrots, and I'm on the record many times saying that. Vegetable gardening and that sort of thing, it's a huge labour. Like I could maintain 200 cows daily in less time than it'd take you to weed 20 metres of carrot garden bed. Growing vegetables in a market garden organic context is quite a laborious undertaking. So we struggled with that. And so at the moment we do beef, pork, lamb, eggs, and then we've got our honey in a little home orchard. And the orchard for us isn't very large, so we value add everything. You know, we might have 80 kilos of plums ready in 1 week, so my wife will turn them all into jams and preserves, and then we value add it, and we've given it a shelf stable sales life of 12 months, and it works a lot better for our business doing it like that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Look, to me, a vegetable garden is exercise too. So it's amazing, even just a few hours a week, how much you can grow for yourself and your family. So it's not really but I don't think I'd ever make a business out of it. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's. I think where we sort of came unstuck with it was we were trying to train people, and the people we were attracting were trying to upskill on the way. And I really think if you want to do it efficiently at like a small scale commercial level, you really should be going to another professional market gardener and doing a bit of an internship or apprenticeship, because there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of finesse, and you have to work hard. So I don't think it was fair to everyone involved trying to learn on the fly. There was definitely some institutional knowledge that would have made things a lot easier for everyone involved, especially when we were trying to turn ourselves inside out, doing it all organic and no-till and heirloom. We were trying to do the duck's guts like as we do. But we had great carrots and tomatoes while it lasted. If we couldn't find my children, we knew where they were.
Yeah, they do taste good, I must say, your own stuff. I mean, more people should have their own gardens. Most of us can't buy, produce our own meat or milk or anything, but growing a few carrots, tomatoes, that kind of stuff, that's not too difficult, and it's just great. I mean, it's better for the human body and soul to be outside in contact with nature. There's a thing called biophilia. We just have this instinctive thing that we love the outdoors, and bright light is good for you too. Being cooped up inside all day and looking at screens is not a natural way to live.
Yeah, absolutely. We're big on the natural light. We wear the blue blockers at home, the fancy glasses, to try to protect our light environment. But I tell you, during COVID, there was a big boom, the lockdowns. Everyone wanted to plant a tomato plant and have a couple of chooks in the backyard. If I would have had an extra few thousand chickens in my paddock, I could have found them more homes in town. But short memories, feels like all that ground that was claimed back by that sort of small homesteading movement. It really feels like people are back to the rat race and just trying to provide for themselves. So different climate again.
Yeah. Look, it's a pity actually. I reckon it is. I mean, I'm an ex-mowing contractor, so I love that kind of thing anyway. But I just think it's one of the greatest activities you can possibly do. I love to get outside, get my hands dirty. I've still got dirty fingernails. I never get them really clean. Just enjoy physical activity, air, sunshine, green growing things. It's wonderful. And you can grow your own food as well. It's just a great way to live.
It is, being outside, especially I find being with livestock really relaxing. If I've had a big day and I just want to take 10 minutes and just unwind, I'll go sit under a tree near my pigs or near my cattle, and they'll all come up and lick my boots and want to say hi. And animals, they never slur you and they never talk back to you. They're always good conversationalists, and I enjoy being around my livestock, which is one of the reasons we do what we do. Well, Jim, I'd like to thank you for coming on today and having a bit of a chat with me. I'm really interested to hear what the Jim's franchise has coming up for the health space. Good on you for having a crack into it. I look forward to seeing what comes out of it, and we'll be tracking what you do for sure.
Yeah, well, good to talk to you, Jacob. I'm pleased to hear about your venture. I've read about similar things in America, but I haven't read anything about anyone doing it in Australia, so it's great.
Well, I'd love to have you along on a farm tour one day. I'll email you some literature on my farm, and you can have a look at what we're doing. But we're trying to change people's perception that food doesn't have to have a cost. There is a way to produce food where the animal can have a great life, the environment's being stewarded in a really positive way, and we're creating food that is healing and nourishing to people, not this detrimental intake stuff. And there's a way to do it, and there's a cost associated, and it's worth it. And that's really our mission, what we're trying
We
to.
are doing a lot of damage, actually. You know, one of the things, I mean, I know we're getting to the end of it, but one of the problems I have is with the decline of insects. When I was a kid, you go for a drive and insects splattered all over the windscreen of the car. These days, nothing. It just
Absolutely.
doesn't happen. Insects are a fraction of what they used to be, and that's a big worry. We need to change the way we farm.
Absolutely. I talk about this a lot. I remember being a child and driving to Melbourne from Albury, which is a bit over 300 kilometres, and my dad would clean the windscreen twice, like you said. Now, my car that I drive, I've had the car 6 years. I don't reckon I've cleaned the windscreen once. You know, the car gets a wash every now and then, but I've never once at the servo thought I better get all those bugs off because they're not there. Exactly to your point, but I do find
frightening. It's the smallest things of all the things that you don't see are the things that are the most concern. It's the life in the soil, the worms, the bacteria, the fungi, all those kind of things that you really need. And it's the insects in the air, the pollinators, and we're losing them. I think we're doing terrible damage, and it will catch up with us.
well, we've got the knowledge and we've got the tools to repair it. You know, we just need to do the work. Like this home block that I lease here, which is 45 hectare, in the first 3 years of farming it, I took our soil carbon from 1% to 3.5%. And it wasn't hard. All we did was we mobbed our cattle up behind that electric fence, like I explained to you earlier, and we shifted them every day. Instead of letting them overgraze and selectively graze and have run of the farm, we treated them like a wild mob, and we had that heavy impact, long recovery. I don't know if you've ever read Alan Savory's work, but we're just doing holistic grazing on the farm. And once you take an animal and with human management, let it express its natural instinct, which is for cattle is to be migratory. So we're practicing little migrations around our farm. The animal's really healthy and happy, and the environment responds well, and that's our whole thing. If you're treating the animal right, they are good for the animals. Are not bad for the environment. Animals are the environment. It's human mismanagement that makes animals bad for the environment. So, you know, we're all about promoting those natural systems.
Yeah, moving cattle around, I've read a fair bit about that kind of stuff too, and it leaves the pest behind. It nourishes the soil, but they don't pick up on the garbage because it has a chance to settle before they come back there. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Absolutely. I've never drenched an animal since we started, and our animals aren't wormy. And, you know, the way we graze animals largely in Australia and around the world is they're constantly drinking out of water that they've urinated and defecated in, and they're eating grass around where their neighbour went potty. And of course we're going to get sick. This is what I tell the kids on school tours. It's like, who wants to go home tonight? And when you're having dinner, you take your cup and you scoop your cup of water out of the toilet. And that's what you're going to drink for dinner. And all the kids go, ew. I'm like, well, that's what we ask our animals to do. You know, just because they can't tell us they don't like it doesn't mean they like it. So we pump all the water to the animals and we keep them out of all of our riparian areas, which has been amazing for the farm. We've had native water lily turn up almost instantly. We've had all these turtles and frogs and snakes and lizards and birds. We have a twitcher come out and do bird counts, and the bird count on the farm, we've got quadruple the species we had 6-7 years ago. Just by planting a few trees and letting our riparian areas restore. And it's really fun, Jim, because our farm has far more animals per metre than any of our neighbours, and we're far more productive per metre, but we're still able to have all these positive ecological outcomes. So, you know, it's the power of what we can do with management, but there's a high labour cost. We throw a lot of labour onto our farm.
Yeah, well, send me some details. I'd love to come and look sometime. Come up with my wife.
Sure, it'd be great to have you. You can bring the new Jim's Regenerative Farming division, and we'll do a crash course around the farm.
All right, okay. Good to
I love
talk to
it.
you. Thank you.
Thanks for your time, Jim.